Lesson 13. How to spot when the market hits a top. The market is perhaps the most important but least understood element in investing. In this lesson, Bill O'Neill explains the details of a market index and what signs to look for when the market is hitting a top.
Knowing when to buy or sell a stock is key. Lesson 1 of this book is dedicated to why individual stock investors should always, without exception, cut every loss when down 8% below the price paid for a stock. A man wrote to us and said he'd read my book, How to Make Money in Stocks, and agreed with the methods discussed, but didn't agree with the loss-cutting rule. To make any method work, you have to develop the strict discipline to follow all of the rules, not just the ones you find agreeable. Most investors have trouble believing all of the principles of sound investing. It takes losing hard-earned cash before they start to understand that stocks are highly speculative and can easily decline a lot more than 8%. Bernard Baruch, a well-known financier, said you don't have to be right all the time in the market. In fact, you could make a fortune only being right 50% of the time as long as you have the sense to always cut short your losses. Because 3 out of 4 stocks, regardless of how good they are, will eventually follow the trend of the general market, it is important to learn how to spot when the market is hitting a top. After 4 or 5 days of distribution, selling, the general market will normally turn down. Using this approach, it was fairly easy to spot the top in the 1998 bull market. See the top chart on page 71. In general, distribution is indicated by the index closing down on increased volume or a day's attempted advance stalling, very little change in price, on greater volume than the day before. On April 22, the top chart on page 71, the Dow closed down slightly from the prior day's close. The daily close is indicated by the short horizontal slash mark in the vertical daily line. The NYSE volume at the bottom of the chart increased from the day before. That's day 1 of distribution. 3 days later at point 2, the Dow declined badly and the volume again increased from the day before. That's day 2 of distribution. 6 days later at point 3, the Dow closed down with that day's volume up. The very next day, point 4, the sell-off accelerated on increased volume and you had the 4th day of distribution. 4 days of distribution, if correctly spotted over a 2 or 3 week period, are often enough to turn a previously advancing market into a decline. Sometimes distribution could be spread over 6 or 7 weeks if the market attempts to rally back to new highs. When I see 4 clear distribution days, I will start looking for stocks that are giving indications they should be sold or trimmed back. I will go through sell rules for individual stocks in lessons 20 and 21.
How do you learn to correctly spot these days of distribution on the Dow?
I check Investors Business Daily's General Market and Sectors page every day because I don't want to miss the few days when these distribution signals may suddenly appear with no prior warning. To be naive, unaware, uninformed, or not on the job almost always costs you money. Anyone can learn how to spot distribution days. How long will it take you to do it well? Ask yourself, how long did it take you to learn how to drive a car properly, play golf, or the piano? Like any skill, you just have to practice and over time you steadily improve. Note on the top chart that a 5th day of distribution occurred a week later, on May 15th. Once you see these signs, you should stop all buying and even cut back your positions. From some later point, the market average will always attempt to rebound and turn upward. This we call a rally. Don't get drawn into the 1st or 2nd day of any rally after you have seen 4 or 5 definite distribution days. It could be a false rally. The market is now turning into a downtrend and you don't want to buy anything until the market signals a clear and powerful follow-through day, which usually occurs between the 4th and 7th day of an attempted rally. More on this in lesson 14. Now notice point 1 in July 1998. Volume is up for the day, but the Dow churns, making no net headway. It stalls and closes slightly down, day 1 of distribution. 2 days later at point 2, it does the same thing. The market average breaks down with volume up. 4 days later, at point 4, the Dow closes off slightly on higher volume. Again, you have the 4th day of distribution and it's selling time. If you're invested on margin using borrowed money, your risk can be twice as great, so sell and get off margin, otherwise you can get seriously hurt. The market is telling you this is when you should be fearing, not hoping. The next day, point 5, volume escalates further and you're into a headlong decline. There is no reason for individual investors to be fully invested in stocks from that top to the ultimate market bottom if they had studied and used this method. Markets never go down by accident. The information and signals are always there. Sadly, ignorance, ego, pride, vacillation, and unrealistic hoping usually prevent people from objectively analyzing the market averages and making sell decisions correctly.
These topping patterns seem to show up again and again.
That's correct. Here's one last example, the bottom chart on page 71, that should further clarify how you properly evaluate the market's direction. This, along with your investor's business daily, should be worth a lot of dollars to you if you'll buckle down, study, and learn how to take advantage of these clear-cut signals. Point 1 in June 1990 was the first day of distribution during the uptrend of the previous month. Point 2 shows the Dow stalling and barely closing down with just a slight increase in volume, but it still indicates a second day of distribution. At point 3, the Dow closes down sharply on a big jump in volume. 11 days later, at point 4, the Dow is down on more volume. At point 5, the Dow actually stalls and closes up slightly for the day, but the net gain is significantly less than the net gain on the prior 2 days of big increases in the Dow. Also, it closes in the lower part of that day's spread from high to low, on enormous volume. The key here is the Dow index moves up much less than the day before, while increased large volume occurs. This is how you analyze the law of supply and demand at work each day in this market index. It's detailed, it's important, and it's also something few people understand or take the time to learn. Why is it important? Simple. If you don't understand how to interpret this market action, you'll just lose a lot more money because you've missed a clear selling opportunity. Points 6, 7, and 8 are the remaining days of distribution across the 1990 market top. The Dow then turned down into a bear market decline of 22%. Anyone observing these 8 days would have sold some stock. When the next attempted rally or two failed, they would have sold some more. I was completely out of this market by August 1, 1990, and avoided serious losses. Every rally attempt failed until the first valid follow-through day occurred on the 5th day of the attempted rally in October. At that time, it was once again safe to re-enter the market and begin to buy.
If you liked the video, please click the like button below and subscribe the channel. Summary. 1. Knowing when to buy and sell a stock is key. 2. Because 3 out of 4 stocks, regardless of how good they are, will eventually follow the trend of the general market, it is important to learn how to spot when the market is hitting a top. 3. After 4 or 5 days of distribution within a 2 to 3 week period, the general market will normally turn down. 4. Distribution is indicated by the index closing down on increased volume or a day's attempted advanced stalling on greater volume than the day before. At this time, review the stocks in your portfolio and look for individual selling signs that indicate you should cut back or sell them.